भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with the chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 49 to 50. Durena hi avaram karma buddhiyogat dhananjaya buddhau saranam anvicha krupanaha फलहेतवः बुद्धियुक्तः जहात इह उभे सुकृत दुष्कृते तस्मात् योगाय युज्यस्य योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्. Here is the English translation. Far away indeed from the balanced intellect is the action, devoid of greatness, O winner of wealth. Take refuge in the intellect. Pitiful are those who live for the fruits of action. Again, far away indeed from the balanced intellect is the action devoid of greatness, O winner of wealth. Take refuge in the intellect. Pitiful are those who live for the fruits of action. He whose intellect is united with the self casts off both good and evil even here. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga. yoga is skill in action. Again, he whose intellect is united with the self casts off both good and evil even here. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga. Yoga is skill in action. Now we recap with the last verse where we left off. Established in yoga, O winner of wealth, perform actions. Having abandoned attachment and having become balanced in success and failure, for balance of mind is called yoga. So here Bhagavan explains yoga as the basis of an integrated life, a means of bringing into harmony the inner creative silence and the outer activity of life. And it is the way to act with precision and success. So here again Bhagavan prepares Arjuna with the words, be without the three gunas, and then he says yoga is that eternally balanced and never changing state of transcendental consciousness which, remaining transcendent while yet grounded in the very nature of the mind, sets the mind free to participate in activity without becoming involved in it. Now Bhagavan continues with this verse 49, and here he brings three important aspects. One is the balanced intellect and taking refuge in that intellect, and he talks of those who are pitiful. In this verse 49, the whole philosophy of karma or action is clearly explained to Arjuna so that he may become an integrated and dynamic person. Here, Bhagavan wants Arjuna to have a deep conviction and a clear conception of the relationship between the state of yoga and action, and also between the yoga and the doer. This is the whole purpose of Bhagavan's teaching when he says, take refuge in the intellect. It introduces the ideal principle for the integration of life and provides a simple technique for its achievement. Here, Bhagavan is referring to this balanced intellect as Buddhi Yoga, the balanced state of mind. He makes a clear distinction between the action in which the intellect, the Buddhi Yoga, becomes involved and that in which it remains uninvolved. He says that the action performed without gaining balance of mind or yoga is of an inferior nature. It is ineffective and weak, devoid of greatness. And so Bhagavan asks Arjuna to rise to the uninvolved state of intellect so that his action may acquire greatness and he may be enabled at the same time to gain the state of freedom. Bhagavan says, take refuge in the intellect, and thereby asking Arjuna first to turn within and be without the three gunas, Nistragunyo Bhava Arjuna, and then remaining established in the state of yoga in the self to perform actions. Yogastaha Kuru Karmani. So again, taking refuge in the intellect is first turning within, be without the three gunas, and then remaining established in this state of yoga, you perform the actions. Bhagavan wants Arjuna to begin the act even before beginning the action, to establish himself in the yoga. And here again, he has defined yoga as balance of mind, a state of fullness, which is a state of natural equanimity. In this state, a man is not affected by success or failure. It is not that he consciously tries to treat loss and gain as the same, but that he is naturally unaffected by them. A really good and desirable state which is reached through the practice of transcendental meditation. It is important to note here that any endeavor to preserve equanimity of mind without gaining this state, merely by trying to view all things as alike, may be called hypocrisy or self-deception. Bhagavan is certainly not telling Arjuna to cultivate a mood of equanimity or maintain a conscious indifference towards the results during the process of an action. And further, he is saying any such attempt to maintain equanimity on the thinking level can only lead to tension and dullness of the mind. So the emphasis here, as in the previous verse, is on gaining pure intelligence, on gaining the pure being. It is the state of being which cultures the mind to be one-pointed, thus improving its effectiveness during action. It is unfortunate that for many centuries past, this and similar verses spoken by Lord Krishna on the yoga of action have been misinterpreted. For this has caused people to lose their vigor and perseverance in action in the name of non-attachment. And because of loss of the vigor and the perseverance in action in the name of non-attachment, the result has been idleness, impotence, and the weakening of the very structure of both individual and social life. So here Bhagavan is giving a dynamic philosophy. Again, Bhagavan is giving a dynamic philosophy which is meant to inspire a disheartened man and strengthen a normal mind. Instead, owing to general misinterpretation, it has become a means to incapacitate man in all fields of activity, and it has become a dragging influence on human endeavor. Again, the whole purpose of Bhagavan giving this is so that one can become integrated and a dynamic person. When Bhagavan says, "Pitiful are those who live for the fruits of action," he derides the fate of those who are unable to rise to this state of action in non-attachment. He says they are pitiful who seek only to enjoy the outer field of life, who do not live the fullness of the inner and outer glories of life by developing this balanced state of mind. Again, pitiful are those who live for the fruits of action, those who just look forward to the results of their actions are to be pitied. This statement in particular has been much misunderstood by commentators. They have advised people to work but not to aim at a result. In reality, it's certain, however, that an action must be done to achieve some result. No action can be performed without some clear result in view. So Bhagavan here only means to show Arjuna a principle of raising the value of action by raising the level of the mind and enabling it to rise to the state of unbounded consciousness in eternal freedom. For example, when an arrow is to be shot, the first step is to pull it back on the bow. If instead, in the hurry of things, the arrow is shot forward without being pulled back on the bowstring, then the aim will not be achieved and the target will not be reached. So the action will be without force and the actor will remain unfulfilled. Again, Bhagavan means that pitiable are those who are in such a hurry to achieve the fruit of action that they begin to act without adequate preparation to make the action forceful. They are not pitiable because they aim at the fruit of action. So, again, they are not pitiable because they aim at the fruit of action. They are pitiable because they fail to achieve the full fruit of their action. Again, they are pitiable because they do not know how to make their actions yield the maximum result and bring fulfillment to their aspirations. Bhagavan furthers this thought saying, they are pitiable because they care nothing for the cause, they care only for the effect. In this way, they lose opportunities for improvement and greater gain. It is important to understand the intellect is the source or cause of action. So Bhagavan says, take refuge in the intellect, and far away indeed from the balanced intellect is the action devoid of greatness. So it is important for his mind to be withdrawn and brought back to the absolute state of intellect. And unless the mind is withdrawn and brought back to the absolute state of intellect, a man's deeds in the world will be weak, and that is why he is called pitiable. Again, Bhagavan says, pitiable is he, as per Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, who fails to commune with the inner divine consciousness. He is pitiable because he is neither able to enjoy the full result of his actions nor to overcome their binding influence. It is well understood that action is performed on the level of the senses, but it has its origin at the inception of the thinking process. A thought starts from the deepest level of the mind. It is appreciated on the thinking level, where it takes the form of a desire. And this desire in its turn expresses itself in the form of action. This is why Bhagavan is saying that the balanced intellect and the field of action are far apart. One is on the level of the absolute life energy and the other is on a weak and diffuse level of energy. Because as the process of manifestation of a thought develops into action, the concentration of energy becomes weaker. So for this reason, Bhagavan declares that they are pitiable who tend towards action alone rather than towards a resolute state of intellect first and then to action later. Maharishi says, though he who practices transcendental meditation and becomes acquainted with the inner divine consciousness truly enjoys the greatest fruit of action in the world. At the same time, he grows increasingly free from bondage and eventually achieves integration of life. Now we go to the next verse. Bhagavan is saying, he whose intellect is united with the self casts off both good and evil even here. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga. Yoga is skill in action. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Here, Bhagavan is contrasting the opposing characteristics of yoga and karma. The yoga and karma, which is the action. Yoga is pulling the arrow back, and karma is shooting the arrow forward. One who tries to shoot the arrow without first pulling it back on the bow is said to have a poor sense of action. His shot will not be strong and his arrow will not go far because it will not be carried forward with force. Those who are wise in the skill of action, who first pull the arrow back and then proceed to shoot it ahead. As the mind becomes established in transcendental consciousness, the state of being becomes infused into the very nature of the mind, which thus gains the status of cosmic intelligence. And coming out of the transcendental state of consciousness, a man regains individuality, by virtue of which he is able to act in the relative field of life. But now he is acting differently. He acts infused with being. Such a person is as naturally above the influence of right and wrong, just as a wealthy businessman is above normal losses and gains. Further, Bhagavan is emphasizing that the effect of yoga is to raise a man to his real stature of eternal freedom in divine consciousness, where he will ever remain untouched by the influence of the action, be it good or bad. And let us understand this. This is not because he should be deprived of the good and bad fruits of his action, but because it is his due that, while enjoying the fruits of his actions, he should also enjoy the state of eternal freedom. Again, while enjoying the fruits of his action, he should also enjoy the state of eternal freedom. And the next point Bhagavan is conveying is very important. It is not the action or its fruits that bind a man, rather it is the inability to maintain freedom which becomes a means of bondage. And what does yoga do? Yoga removes this inability. It is the glory of yoga that it increases the power of both the action and the actor, bringing dignity to life in all its aspects. Now let us see, where is this bondage? The bondage certainly lies in the field of action. So there is no bondage in the field of yoga. It is in the field of action, but it is not born of action. It is born of the weakness of the actor. For example, when a small businessman incurs a loss, his mind is profoundly affected by it, and this creates a deep impression, which comes to the surface again as a desire for gain when favorable conditions present themselves. An impression on the mind is the seed of the desire which leads to action, and action in turn produces an impression on the mind, and thus the cycle of impression, desire, and action continues, keeping a man bound to the cycle of cause and effect, the cycle of birth and death. And this is commonly called the binding influence of action, the bondage of karma. So here you understand how the impressions are created, and this impression on the mind is the seed of the desire, which leads to action, and every action further produces another impression, and then the cycle of impression, desire and action continues, and this is what keeps the man bound to the cycle of cause and effect and the cycle of birth and death. And this is what we say normally, the binding influence of action, the bondage of karma. Now Bhagavan talks about the skill of action. Bhagavan says that one transcends the binding influence of right and wrong, and this will not be the result of inaction, but will be due to skill in action. And again, what is this skill in action? It is the technique of performing an action so that the whole process becomes easy. The action is completed with the least effort, leaving the doer fresh enough to enjoy fully the fruits of his action, while at the same time remaining untouched by its binding influence. And not only this, the action is performed quickly so that the doer begins to enjoy the results immediately. So here is the skill in action. And this skill in action does not allow any negative influence from outside to hinder the performance of action, nor does it produce any negative influence either upon the doer or upon anyone anywhere. On the contrary, the influence it creates is wholly positive. So now, bringing a summary, the process of action, if carried out with what is here called skill in action, it produces good results in all directions and enables the doer to derive maximum benefit from it. At the same time, it fails to produce a binding influence on him. This is because it influences the doer in such a way that its fruits do not leave an impression in the mind deep enough in the form to form the seed of future action. Again, it influences the doer in such a way that its fruits do not leave an impression in the mind deep enough to form the seed of future action, and the doer being established in the self, the eternal being, and ever unattached to the field of activity. Here ends the essence of these two verses, 49 and 50, Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, Maharishi's commentary of the Bhagavad Gita. Now I will add a few words. For the practical side, it is very important, as Bhagavan Krishna says, Yogastaha Kuru Karmane. So, situated in the self, situated in the yoga, you perform the actions. So this is why it is so important to meditate regularly. So when this yoga is established, then all the principles of this authenticity and integrity are naturally developed. Life is for expansion, and life is expansion of this bliss. So one being established in this yoga, then one also develop the peak, rise to the peak performance. There should also be some conscious effort on this to developing these peak possibilities, peak of all the possibilities, the capabilities and the abilities one has. You must take into account whatever is available, whatever is needed to train yourself so that you have the peak of the energy and the peak of your capabilities and possibilities. So when one develops this Shraddha, then it takes one to the full potential, whether it is health, creativity, solving relationship problems, or achieving and attaining wealth or inner fulfillment. It doesn't matter what it is. So this integrity in thinking and the authenticity in action, yoga karmasu kausalam, these will become naturally available, and one gains naturally more success and naturally remains in freedom, being ever unattached to the field of activity. This is indeed the greatness of Maharishi's teaching and bringing out the pure essence of what Bhagavan is trying to convey. Again, I would like to take a minute to remind that the ultimate goal of transcendental meditation is to attain cosmic consciousness. This state of cosmic consciousness, in reality, it is difficult to describe, but it is a state wholly inclusive of both the transcendental and the relative fields of existence. It can only be described in terms of two opposites, of two seemingly contradictory statements. So we start by saying that it is that which lies between the opposites, between eternal silence and perpetual activity, and that it is both activity in silence and silence in activity. Even though this state may be beyond the ability of the human intellect to conceive, it is real. It is difficult to describe even the self-consciousness or the transcendental consciousness, let alone the cosmic consciousness. But we can attempt by saying cosmic consciousness is universal awareness and self-consciousness is self-awareness. So this self-awareness or the self-realization is a state of the transcendental nature. And here, though indescribable, again it can be hinted by two contrary statements. One, that it is a state of positive experience, and two, that it is a state of no experience. All I want to say is, when you experience the self, which is a no experience, then you know it. That's all I can say. When the mind experiences the subtle states of the medium of meditation, the mind is the experiencer, and that which is experienced is the object of experience. Now we understand the subject and object relationship is established when experience begins. The process of meditation ultimately leads to the transcendental being. When the subtlest point of the object is transcended and the experiencer alone is left devoid of the object. So when the object of experience is no more and the subject alone is, this is a state of no experience. Why? Because the subject and object have become one. The duality has ceased to be, and the unity alone is found. When the subject, the experiencer, and the object of experience merge together, it is fullness of experience. Experience then is so full that the two are united. In one sense, it is a state of no experience because the object of experience has ceased to be. In another sense, it is the fullness of experience because the experiencer and the experienced are united together. And this is why we are able to say that it is a state of positive experience, which as such is true, and in the same breath assert that there is no subject-object relationship, which is also true. In my own experience, difficult to put it in words, this is the way I felt it. There was this homogeneous, some energy, homogeneous, infinite, all-pervading. And all that there was this homogeneous, infinite, all-pervading. And it seemed so full, which is difficult to comprehend at that point. But I could speak about it afterwards. This fullness cannot be described because it is infinitely full. Now, if you have an object like a cup with full of water, or if you say there is a vessel full of water, or if you say there is a pond full of water, full, that means full up to the brim and not even one more drop can go, then you know it is full. But this fullness has boundaries. It is not infinite, and it is not all pervading. And so it is beyond comprehension to say that there is infinite, all pervading, with no boundaries, and yet it is very full. And this is the experience I repeatedly have with the transcendental consciousness. And this fullness, what is it full? Full of bliss. Because Atma is Ananda. So there is no other, there is no duality here. All that there is this self which is fully awake, fully alert, and in its fullness. You might have your own words of comprehending it or describing it, or not able to describe it because it is something beyond comprehension and beyond words. How can anything infinite be described? And how can anything which is also said to be a state of no experience be described? But it doesn't matter. When it happens, you know it. So moving forward, the inward march of the mind in transcendental meditation leads to self-consciousness, and when self-consciousness is brought out into the field of the relative field and lived, it pervades the whole field of activity. And this is the secret of yoga. Then the eternal silence of the transcendental goes hand in hand with the activity of the world. So the inner eternal silence and the outer perpetual activity are harmonized and live together in the state of silence in activity and activity in silence. So to reach cosmic consciousness from self-consciousness, then no particular special practice is needed, and it is important to continue with the experience of the transcendent and then coming out. As Maharishi Ji always said, go inwards to the transcendent and then you come out again, because one cannot remain forever in the transcendental being. So here Maharishi says, it is this very coming out of the mind from the transcendent which constitutes the process by which cosmic consciousness is attained. The coming out is an automatic event and an inherent part of going in. For example, the driver dives and having dived, emerges. In the course of diving, he leaves the world, but the world must call him back since he's a created human being. And once he is back, then he engages in manifest activity, and this is already part of cosmic consciousness. This very engagement in activity is the active part, one half, and all that remains to be added is the other, silent, unmanifest half. So, through this special system of transcendental meditation, cosmic consciousness, the highest peak of human evolution, the state in which man, the human, is transformed into man, the divine, can be attained. And the process of attainment is not difficult. It is not at all laborious, nor demanding. And it does not demand that that you have to give up and be in suffering. And it is simple, sure, and above all, natural. All I can say is this is how I gained the cosmic consciousness and then beyond. So I am a living example. Maharishi further explained this growing experience of higher states of consciousness, and he defined 7 states of consciousness. The waking state of consciousness, number 1. Number 2, dreaming state of consciousness. Number 3, sleep state of consciousness. Number 4, transcendental consciousness, also known as Turiya. Number 5, cosmic consciousness. Number 6, God consciousness. And the 7th is unity consciousness. So for all of this, the foundation is the regular practice of transcendental meditation and the experience of the deep silence of pure consciousness, the transcendental consciousness, the field of pure creative intelligence. And this in turn is increasingly integrated into the nature of the mind until enlightenment. In unity consciousness, the full awakening of total knowledge dawns in human awareness. So again, in unity consciousness, the full awakening of the total knowledge dawns in human awareness. So again, I would wrap up and say, knowledge is different in different states of consciousness. Knowledge in the waking state of consciousness is different from knowledge in the dreaming state of consciousness. And again, knowledge is different in the sleep state of consciousness. And this field of total knowledge is our own pure consciousness, our own self. Know thyself. This is the self-realization. Maharishi's greatest contribution is he made the quest for enlightenment, total enlightenment, which is the unity consciousness, the state of life in unbounded freedom, self-sufficiency and bliss accessible to everyone. And he explains enlightenment as the full awakening of individual consciousness to its full cosmic potential, whereby the individual gains the ability to know anything, do anything, and accomplish anything and everything that is nourishing to his life and the world around him. And the transcendental meditation is the means. Maharishi gave further some advanced techniques, but this is the foundation. The transcendence is the foundation. So I will end here and we will continue. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गीतामाहात्म्यम्। गीताशास्त्रमिदं पुण्यं यः पठेत् प्रयतः पुमान् विष्णोः पदमवाप्नोति भयशोकादिवर्जितः। गीताध्ययनशीलस्य प्राणायामपरस्य च नैव सन्ति हि पापानि पूर्वजन्मकृतानि च। मलनिर्मोचनं पुंसां जलस्नानं दिने दिने सकृद्गीताम्भसि स्नानं संसारमलनाशनं। गीतासु गीता कर्तव्या किमन्यैः शास्त्रविस्तरैः या स्वयं पद्मनाभस्य मुखपद्माद्विनिसृता। भारतामृतसर्वस्वं विष्णोर्वक्त्राद्विनिसृतं। गीता गङ्गोदकं पीत्वा पुनर्जन्म न विद्यते। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दुग्धा गोपालनन्दनः। पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। एकं शास्त्रं ते